Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. The morning Trayson Cowell stepped onto his porch, his bridge, his lifeline was gone, not broken, erased. What began as quiet outrage would spiral into sabotage, lawsuits, betrayal, and a war with a tyrannical HOA president. One man, one bridge, and a fight no one saw coming. I knew something was wrong the second I stepped out onto the porch that morning. The air was too still. The silence too perfect. I took my usual sip of black coffee, stared out across the gravel path that led toward the wooden bridge I'd maintained for over 4 decades, and nearly choked. The bridge was gone. Not damaged, not worn down. Gone. As in, vanished. As in, the damn thing had been ripped clean off its pilings, with nothing left but a few fractured support beams jutting out like broken teeth and a pile of torn-up lumber strewn along the riverbank. For a moment, I just stood there in my boots and flannel, coffee going cold in my hand, trying to process it. That bridge had been built by my father in the late 70s. I'd kept it standing ever since, replaced rotted boards, reinforced the supports, sealed the joints against the freeze-thaw of Montana winters. And now it looked like a bomb had gone off. The only road that connected my 10-acre forest property to the county highway had been erased overnight. And with it, any easy way in or out. I set the mug down, grabbed my phone, and walked straight to the river's edge. My boots sank into the mud as I picked my way down the embankment and started taking photos. Every angle, every shattered beam, the exposed anchors, GPS tagged just in case. I even got a video sweep of the damage, my voice tight and low as I narrated it like evidence for a courtroom, which, frankly, I had a gut feeling it would become. Whoever had done this hadn't just vandalized a structure, they'd cut off the only real access to my home. I was stranded, unless I took the old logging road out through the northern side of the property, a winding, overgrown fire break that hadn't seen a grader in years and took nearly 90 minutes to traverse. But there was no choice. I went back to the house, grabbed my truck keys, fired up my old Ram, and started crawling through the forest trail, swerving around fallen limbs and ducking under sagging branches that scraped at the windshield like claws. The route was miserable, thick mud, narrow bends, and ruts deep enough to crack an axle if I wasn't careful. By the time I reached the nearest paved road, I was sweating and pissed, and the sun wasn't even halfway across the sky yet. Once I hit cell service again, I called my attorney, Helen Travis, a no-bull property lawyer I'd worked with before. She picked up on the first ring. I told her exactly what I'd found, and within minutes, she asked me to send all the documentation I had. Photos, videos, deeds, topographic overlays. I drove straight into town, stopped by the notary office, and had my originals recertified just to be safe. I pulled out the full set of land records too, including the registered GPS coordinates that clearly showed the bridge sat entirely on my land, well outside any HOA boundaries. I also called the local sheriff's department and filed a formal complaint for property destruction and trespassing. They dispatched 2 deputies to meet me at the access road near the wreckage. By the time I got back around the long way, there were already 2 patrol cars idling near the river bend, and a pair of large dump trucks parked just past the tree line. Men in high-visibility vests were hauling massive chunks of wood into the beds of the trucks. Planks, nails, sections of railing, bits of the bridge that I'd stained and sealed myself not 3 months ago. My hands curled into fists. I parked, got out, and strode over. "Excuse me," I said loud and sharp. "Who the hell told you to touch that?" One of the workers, a lanky guy with a clipboard and no name tag, froze mid-step. Sir, we were hired by the Eagles Crest HOA. Said the bridge was a safety risk. Said to dismantle it and haul it off. Did they tell you it was on private land?" He blinked. "We were told it was part of a shared buffer zone. Something about a waterway easement. I don't know, we just show up and move stuff." One of the deputies approached and asked for IDs and work orders. The crew hesitated. No company name on the truck. No contract. No city permit. Nothing. Just a vague, "they told us" story. The deputies exchanged looks, then asked the 2 men to step aside. I made damn sure they heard me say the words, "This was criminal trespass and destruction of private infrastructure." One of the officers turned to me and nodded. "Mr. Cowell, if you'd like, we can escort you to the HOA office." Sounds like someone's got a lot of explaining to do. I didn't answer right away. I just looked out at the spot where my father's bridge had once stood, then at the mountain of splintered timber being loaded into someone else's truck. My blood was ice and fire all at once. "Yeah," I said. "Let's go have a little chat with them." The Eagle's Crest HOA office sat like a freshly frosted cupcake at the end of a cul-de-sac full of identical beige boxes they called houses. The landscaping was immaculate, too immaculate. Every blade of grass looked spray-painted, every bush trimmed with military precision. There was even a little fountain out front shaped like an eagle, complete with a plaque that read, "Community begins with control." I parked with the deputies behind me, took a breath, and walked in. The lobby smelled like vanilla-scented toner. Faux wood floors, white walls, framed inspirational quotes about safety and harmony. Behind the reception desk sat a young woman with perfectly symmetrical bangs and a nameplate that said, "Emily." She looked up and froze the moment she saw the badge on the deputy's belt. "Is Mrs. Marchbrook in?" one of the deputies asked. I think so," Emily stammered. "She's just finishing a board call." He didn't wait for her to buzz us in. We stepped through the security door and followed the hallway to a corner office with a sign that read, "Karen Marchbrook, HOA President." I don't think I've ever seen a name so perfectly match a face. She was sitting behind a white desk the size of a pool table, typing on a tablet with all the grace of a CEO, faking empathy. Blonde bob, pearl earrings, pastel sweater. She looked up at me like I was a misdelivered Amazon package. "Well, this is unexpected," she said with a measured smile. "Mr. Cowell, is it?" The deputy cleared his throat. "Ma'am, we have a complaint involving property destruction and unauthorized entry onto private land." Karen didn't flinch. "Ah, yes. The bridge." She clicked her tablet off and folded her hands like a school principal preparing to suspend a kid for chewing gum. "We discussed it during our last community safety review. It was deemed a hazard, deteriorating structure, risk of collapse, proximity to the shared recreational water zone. 73% of the HOA residents voted for its removal." I stared at her, speechless for a split second. "That bridge was not in your development. It's on my land. You don't get to vote on it like it's a neighborhood barbecue." She tilted her head like she was listening to a confused toddler. "There must be some mistake. Our community zoning map clearly indicates that the river corridor is a protected easement and buffer zone. If your bridge intersects it, we have the right to remove obstructions." At that, I pulled the folder from my messenger bag, laid it flat on her desk like a courtroom bomb, satellite images, county-registered GIS overlays, deed maps, coordinates with timestamps, a notarized survey I had redone last year, just in case anyone ever got ideas. Karen's smile twitched. She leaned forward, adjusted her glasses, and scanned the top page, then the second. Then she glanced toward one of the deputies who was now frowning. "This isn't the same map we have," she said, suddenly clipped. "No," I said, "because mine is real. Yours is either made up or outdated by about 25 years. And even then, the bridge predates your entire subdivision, built by my father in 1978. Permitted, documented, and sitting fully within my property boundary." The deputy took the folder and flipped through it himself. He looked back at Karen. "Ma'am, did you, or your board, obtain a court order or permission from Mr. Cowell before initiating removal of the structure?" She hesitated. It was only for half a second, but it was enough. "As I said, we voted. Our attorney advised us that—" "Did you notify the property owner in writing?" "Well, no," she said. "We assumed it was under shared oversight." "And did you, or anyone acting on your authority, enter the property without the owner's consent?" Silence. Then, "Technically, yes." That's when her voice shifted, from silk to sandpaper. "But that structure was dangerous. It could have collapsed into the stream and polluted the water. We have children who play down there." I was acting in the interest of safety. One of the deputies stepped forward. "Ma'am, please stand. You are being detained for investigation under Montana Code. Annotated 45-6-203, criminal trespass, and 45-6-101, destruction of property. You have the right to remain silent." "What?" Karen shot up from her chair like she'd sat on a tack. "You're arresting me? This is absurd. I am the president of a homeowners association, and I'm the owner of the land you destroyed," I snapped. "And your little HOA charter doesn't give you the right to send hired thugs onto private property in the middle of the night." Emily, the receptionist, gasped as Karen was gently but firmly cuffed and led past her desk. "Call the board," Karen hissed over her shoulder. "Tell them to prepare a statement." were being targeted. As they loaded her into the cruiser, one of the deputies looked at me and said, "I'd suggest you file a separate civil suit." "This one's going to get complicated." I nodded. "Yeah," I muttered. "I've got a feeling this is just getting started." 2 weeks later, the courtroom smelled like wood polish and artificial solemnity. Karen sat at the defendant's table flanked by 2 attorneys in matching gray suits, like a woman who just realized her empire was made of cardboard. I sat across from her with my lawyer, Helen Travis, compact, composed, and razor-sharp, a woman who'd once made a land developer cry in front of a judge for cutting down protected trees. We weren't here for a criminal trial. That was coming later. This was civil court, a lawsuit for damages, trespassing, destruction of property, and obstruction of access to a private residence. In legal terms, the basics. In practical terms, revenge, justice, and setting the record straight in front of God and the county. Karen's defense, classic HOA maneuvering. They claimed it was a simple misunderstanding, that the map they had been referencing was based on a legacy zoning plan from decades ago, and that Karen, acting in good faith, had believed the bridge was a community liability. They pinned the entire decision on a vote during an HOA board meeting, conveniently one where no minutes were taken and no external legal consultation was documented. Helen tore it apart like tissue paper. She presented our deed with full legal description, a certified property survey stamped by a county official just 9 months prior, photos of the bridge in pristine condition taken within weeks of its destruction, a copy of a maintenance schedule I'd been keeping for the last 5 years, including receipts for pressure-treated lumber, bolts, and stain. She even brought up the building permit from 1978, issued to my father, for construction of a private access bridge over Cowell Creek, named, ironically, after my grandfather, back when the area wasn't a collection of cul-de-sacs and jogging trails, but just land and trees and quiet. The judge, graying, heavyset, the kind who liked order and hated excuses, didn't hide his skepticism when Karen's lawyer tried to introduce the HOA map. It looked like something a teenager would draw for a school project. Bright green blobs and little blue lines with vague outlines that contradicted the official GIS data by at least 50 yards. The moment that really cracked the courtroom came when Helen asked Karen directly, under oath, "Did you or any member of your board inform Mr. Cowell in writing of your intent to dismantle his bridge?" Karen paused, adjusted her pearl necklace. "We discussed it. At a meeting, any written notice? Email, certified letter, door tag? No, but... Did you obtain a demolition permit from the county?" "No." "We didn't think it was necessary." Helen turned to the judge and said, "No further questions." That was it. By the time we left the courthouse, the ruling was clear. Karen was to personally pay $25,000 in damages. The HOA was ordered to pay $40,000 more for material and labor costs associated with rebuilding access to the property. They were also slapped with a court order to cease all interactions with my land or structures unless given written consent. It should have felt like a victory, and for a moment, it did. Until I walked out of the courtroom and found a printed flyer on my windshield. "Do you feel safe with an uncontrolled bridge near our children?" All caps, bold font, red letters, no signature. By the time I got back home, taking the long, rough fire trail again, my mailbox was stuffed full of similar notes. Most were anonymous, typed or handwritten in shaky Sharpie. Some suggested my new bridge might collapse and kill someone. One said I was aggressive and paranoid, and that I needed a mental health evaluation. Another accused me of polluting the water with construction debris. That night, I opened my email and found an HOA newsletter that somehow made its way to my inbox. The lead article, "Local landowner fails to consider community safety. Bridge rebuilt with no oversight." I wasn't just the guy with a bridge anymore. I was public enemy number 1. The following weekend, I started work on rebuilding. I wasn't about to let them win. I hired a professional contractor from Kalispell and worked alongside the crew. I designed the new bridge to be stronger, wider, and compliant with every code I could find, federal, state, or otherwise. It sat entirely on my land, with clearance well above the flood line, and I had every inch of it documented in triplicate. But the hostility didn't let up. A few days into construction, one of the workers found a nail jammed into a piece of lumber, not from the packaging, but clearly placed there deliberately. Another day, we discovered a pile of dog feces left near the toolboxes with a note stuck to it reading, "Your bridge stinks." They were trying to break me. Problem was, I don't break. I build. Still, I knew one thing for sure. If they thought a court ruling was the end of this fight, they had no idea who they were dealing with. The new bridge stood half-finished, skeleton-thick beams resting on poured concrete footings when things escalated from passive-aggressive to just plain aggressive. It started with a row of roofing nails laid out on my driveway, heads up. I didn't catch them with my truck, but I damn near stepped on one barefoot when I came out to check the mail. Then came the eggs, thrown with just enough force to splatter but not shatter windows. They hit the siding, the porch columns, even the underside of the overhang above my front door. Organic stink in the morning sun. That's a smell that doesn't leave your nose for days. The first few incidents I treated like childish pranks. I hosed off the eggs, swept up the nails, filed another report with the sheriff's department. But it didn't stop. If anything, the harassment got more organized, more calculated. One night, I was sitting in my living room, watching old reruns and drinking a scotch, when I heard footsteps on the bridge. Not construction crews, not deer, human, cautious, intentional. I grabbed my flashlight and my sidearm, legally owned, registered, holstered, and walked out the front door in silence. The motion lights clicked on a few seconds late, just in time for me to catch a glimpse of 3 figures in hooded sweatshirts darting back into the woods, one of them carrying what looked like a crowbar. I reported it, again. And this time, I installed infrared wildlife cams along both ends of the bridge. High resolution, night vision, motion triggered, hidden in birdhouses and trees, the kind of setup you'd use if you wanted to catch poachers or vandals red-handed. The cameras paid off within 48 hours. A trio of women, all familiar faces from HOA barbecues and yoga flyers, showed up in the middle of the night. One sprayed a foul-smelling liquid along the new railing. Another loosened bolts with a wrench. The third hammered dents into the aluminum siding of one of the temporary scaffolds, then posed with a smug little wave for the others. They were neighbors, the type that smile at you when walking a stroller past your mailbox. I downloaded the footage, burned it to a thumb drive, and handed it off to the sheriff's deputy the next morning. 3 citations for property damage were issued that same day. One of the women showed up at my gate later, looking indignant and betrayed. "You really called the cops on us? Over a bridge?" "No," I said. "Over criminal damage, trespassing, and being dumb enough to smile at the camera." She turned on her heel and stormed off without another word. Then came the break-in. It happened the day I was out in Kalispell meeting with a supplier about pressure-treated timber. I was gone for just 6 hours. When I came back, the front door was splintered around the deadbolt, half-hinged and cracked open like a punched-in jaw. Inside, someone had rifled through my desk drawers, thrown my toolboxes across the garage, and knocked my mounted deer head off the wall just for spite. They didn't steal anything. It wasn't a robbery. It was a message. They didn't want my stuff. They wanted me gone. But what they didn't count on was the fact that I'd recently installed internal motion-activated cameras too, smaller ones hooked into a cloud backup. I had 3 clean shots of the men who entered the house. One wore a high school football hoodie with his last name embroidered on the sleeve. The second had a distinctive limp and wore a reflective vest. The third, I recognized him immediately. He was married to one of the HOA board members. That night, I filed a full criminal report. The next morning, all 3 men were arrested. One tried to claim it was a misunderstanding. Another lawyered up. The third offered me cash to drop the charges. I didn't even answer. I just forwarded everything to Helen, and yet somehow the HOA managed to distance itself entirely. Their official statement claimed that any actions taken by private citizens are not the responsibility of the association. Meanwhile, Karen's name never came up. Not once. Which was strange, considering how omnipresent she used to be. I suspected she was hiding, controlling things through proxies, sending her little chess pieces across the board while she sat back and waited for me to fold. Problem was, she didn't understand the kind of man she was playing against. I don't fold, I reinforce. By the end of that week, I finished the bridge, poured the final sealant coat, checked every joint, verified every inch with the county inspector, who gave it a full pass. The structure could hold 2 tons without flex. I didn't just rebuild, I overbuilt. And I wasn't finished. I took all the surveillance footage, all the reports, all the emails and flyers and threats. I compiled a timeline, cataloged everything with page numbers and reference points. Helen called it the Book of War. I called it insurance. And then I did something new. I applied for a temporary restraining order against the HOA, and any of its board members, barring them from approaching my property line. The court approved it within 24 hours, but that didn't stop them. Karen simply adapted. Instead of HOA members, I started seeing teenagers, strangers, the kind that loiter near trailheads and disappear before you can get a license plate. She was outsourcing the harassment now, which meant it was time for me to outsource too. I called Helen. Then I called a man named Carter Lindley, a private investigator I knew from my engineering days on municipal infrastructure projects. He was ex-law enforcement, quiet, smart, the kind of guy who could slip into a church bake sale and come out with a wiretap. Think you can embed yourself into a suburban HOA? Carter chuckled on the other end of the line. Oh, I've done worse. Get me a haircut and a fake dog, and I'll be on your board by the end of the month. Carter moved into Eagles Crest on a Friday, under the name Dave Lasky, retired insurance claims adjuster, newly divorced, lover of lawn edging and quiet. Evenings. His support dog, a dopey golden retriever named Scout, sealed the deal. People instantly trusted a man with a golden retriever. Within 2 weeks, he was invited to a neighborhood poker night, 2 barbecues, and a gardening committee meeting. By week 3, he'd been offered a temporary seat on the HOA advisory board by none other than Karen Marchbrook herself. I gave him a burner phone with a secure cloud sync app. Every time he left a meeting, he'd upload audio and notes. The early recordings were uneventful. Gripes about tree trimming budgets, a petition to ban wind chimes after dark, a dispute about the tone of a Halloween yard skeleton. But then came one late evening upload titled simply, Bridge Meeting. In it, Karen's voice rang out clearly. I don't care if the court said it's his. That bridge is an eyesore. He rebuilt it like a damn bunker. We need to keep the pressure on him. Make it uncomfortable. Sarah, paint. Something garish. Bright orange. Mark, find a way to pop his tires without leaving a trail. And someone start drafting a petition about environmental impact. That creek could be sensitive wetlands. If we can prove that, he's toast. I must have replayed it 5 times. Her tone wasn't emotional. It was clinical, like assigning chores. Carter followed up with more. A planning meeting where a woman suggested staging a dog poop protest along my fence line. Another where someone joked about setting off fireworks at 3 a.m. accidentally near my house. And worst of all, Karen openly discussing a local reporter she had in her pocket, ready to write a hit piece about a rogue landowner threatening neighborhood peace. That gave me an idea. I called Helen. Let's prep a motion for injunction and civil suit. But I want to go bigger. Not just harassment, we go after them for conspiracy. And while we're at it, I want every financial statement HOAs filed in the last 3 years. Helen whistled. You think there's fraud? I don't know. But I know grifters when I hear them. And Karen's not trying to win. She's trying to bleed me dry. People like that always have a slush fund somewhere. Carter kept feeding me data. HOA meetings where Karen pressured board members to approve strange emergency contracts, payouts to companies no one had ever seen working, duplicate invoices. A contractor named Braddock Environmental Solutions who billed $35,000 for creek erosion assessment but had no website, no listed employees, and whose address turned out to be a mailbox in Bozeman. We traced 5 more of those. Each one billed within days of a new conflict with me. Meanwhile, on the surface, Eagles Crest was pure Stepford. Neatly mowed lawns, pastel shutters, and signs for charity bake sales. But Carter said the mood had shifted. People were whispering. Some suspected Karen was using HOA funds for personal gain. A few quietly asked Carter, is it true she forged the vote about the bridge? One even slipped him a manila envelope with anonymous copies of altered voting records, signatures that didn't match, dates corrected in pen. Helen and I spent the next month building what she called the real case. A civil suit naming Karen and the HOA board for conspiracy, harassment, fraudulent HOA governance, misappropriation of funds, and violation of a restraining order. Carter's recordings were now supplemented with documents, meeting minutes, falsified expense reports, even a list of addresses where Karen had allegedly installed security cameras without homeowner consent to monitor community behavior. I knew we had enough, but I wanted more. I wanted to break the facade they'd built, not just win a settlement. I wanted to make it public, viral, irreversible. So I made a call to a local reporter from the Flathead Ledger, a man named Jacob Reese. Clean reputation. known for taking down a corrupt land developer 2 years earlier. We met over coffee. I handed him a flash drive. Everything's in there: audio, documents, financials, harassment reports. If you want a story that'll blow the roof off of fake neighborhood utopia, it's all yours. He raised an eyebrow. How clean is your side of the fence? I've followed every law, filed every report, and built that bridge to federal standards. The rest is just wooden bolts. But what they've done, that's rot under the paint. Reese smiled. Let's peel it. By the end of the week, the Ledger front page headline read, "Bridge to Nowhere, HOA Tyranny, Fraud, and the Battle Over One Man's Land." Inside, a full exposé. Names, quotes, photos of my destroyed bridge, annotated expense ledgers, HOA bylaws with falsified amendments, even screenshots of a group chat where Karen instructed residents how to file noise complaints en masse to flood county records. That day, the phone didn't stop ringing. Neighbors, former board members, even Karen's old accountant who wanted to talk. The dam had broken. By the time the subpoenas went out, Karen had gone into damage control mode. She released a statement through the HOA calling the newspaper article deeply misleading, based on illegally obtained private conversations, and part of an ongoing harassment campaign by a disgruntled landowner. Classic playbook. Blame the messenger, pretend the problem is tone, not truth. But the court didn't care about spin. We filed the civil suit with the District Court of Flathead County. 78 pages of hard evidence, transcripts, receipts, forged documents, contractor shell records, HOA bylaw violations, bank transfers to P.O. boxes, and, at the heart of it all, the organized campaign to drive me out of my own home. The official title of the case was Dry, Cowell vs. Eagles Crest, HOA et al., but locals knew it by another name, Bridgegate. The judge reviewing the initial motion issued a temporary freeze on all HOA discretionary spending and ordered Karen to appear for deposition within 10 days. That alone sent shockwaves through the neighborhood. But that wasn't the biggest break. 2 days later, I got a call from Helen. "You're going to want to sit down," she said. "You remember the name Braddock Environmental Solutions?" Yeah. Turns out the owner of that LLC is Karen's cousin, lives in Nevada. No real business license, but they've received over $130,000 from HOA accounts over the past 2 years for supposed environmental assessments. Most of it ends up in Karen's bank account through a series of transfers. We've got the routing numbers. That was the moment it shifted from harassment and fraud to criminal conspiracy. We updated the court filings. Helen filed a parallel motion with the county prosecutor and sent the package to the state attorney general. That move changed the landscape. Subpoenas turned into search warrants. The sheriff's department served one at the HOA's office on a Tuesday morning, seizing 2 laptops, a desktop, and 5 storage boxes of physical records. Carter sent me a picture of Karen standing in the parking lot, arms crossed, mouth tight, surrounded by officers. Later that afternoon, I got an email, an anonymous tip. "Check HOA Unit 204, garage. Karen's hiding backups there." Hidden behind the insulation in the east wall, I forwarded it to Helen, and she relayed it to the DA's investigator. They followed up, got another warrant, and found a USB drive stashed in a taped envelope behind fiberglass. On it, meeting recordings we hadn't heard before. More damning. In one, Karen says plainly, "He thinks he's going to beat us. We've outlasted worse. I want him gone. I don't care how the court date was set. Jury trial. Civil and pending criminal charges." Karen tried to delay, claimed medical issues, scheduling conflicts, missing documents. None of it worked. The judge was old school and immune to theatrics. "Let's get to the truth," he said. "That's what we're here for." The courtroom was full on day one. Press residents, former board members, even the guy who built my septic system came down from his cabin to watch. Karen sat at the defense table, flanked by 2 attorneys, paid for presumably by whatever HOA funds were still liquid. Her expression was stone, but I caught her twitch once when Helen rolled in a dolly stacked with labeled evidence binders. We opened strong, surveillance footage, timestamps, maps showing my property line and the destroyed bridge's exact position. I testified for nearly 3 hours, calmly walking through every incident, every document, every retaliation. Helen led with surgical precision. Then came Carter. He played audio after audio, names, assignments. Karen's voice, over and over, push him, paint his siding, sabotage the rail, keep him nervous. The jury didn't flinch, but I saw their eyes harden. But the showstopper? A woman named Maria Levin, former treasurer of the HOA. She contacted us after the Ledger article. She came in, took the oath, and said, "I was told to sign off on checks I wasn't allowed to review. I saw altered invoices. I raised concerns." Karen told me, "If you can't handle the pressure, maybe you should resign." So I did, but I kept everything. She brought her own files, duplicates, originals, dates that didn't match Karen's records, and a spreadsheet she'd been maintaining of ghost vendors since last year. At the end of her testimony, Helen asked, "In your opinion, was the HOA operating under lawful and transparent practices?" Maria didn't hesitate. No, it was a front for Karen's control. We stopped being a neighborhood association and became her weapon. Karen's attorneys looked like they wanted to disappear into their chairs. Day 4, the prosecution closed. The defense flailed, claimed bias, claimed Carter's recordings were entrapment, claimed I provoked the neighborhood by building a militarized structure on community-adjacent land. But it didn't stick. They were throwing smoke in a room full of fans. Then, right before the weekend recess, the judge issued an emergency injunction. Effective immediately, the Eagles Crest HOA was to cease all operations, disband its board, and freeze all assets pending criminal proceedings. I didn't cheer. I didn't smile. I just sat there, quiet. The gavel came down like a hammer on a coffin lid. But the trial wasn't over. Next came sentencing. And Karen. She still had more to lose. By the second week of the trial, the courtroom didn't feel like a courtroom anymore. It felt like a slow-burning funeral. Karen's confidence had thinned out to a pale outline of its former self. The press called her the Iron Lady of HOA, but now she looked like she was trying to disappear into her seat, flinching every time Helen dropped another document in front of the jury. The prosecution rested. It was now time for closing arguments and the jury's verdict. Helen walked them through the case with the calm of a surgeon and the sharpness of a scalpel. The bridge, the trespass, the harassment campaign, the misuse of funds, the conspiracy, the recordings, the fake vendors, the altered elections. The jury didn't take long. Less than 6 hours later, they returned with a verdict, liable on all civil counts, including conspiracy, harassment, and HOA fraud. The court ordered full restitution to me, plus damages. But that wasn't the real hit. The real hammer came from the criminal side. Just 2 days after the civil verdict, the county DA filed 27 criminal charges against Karen Marchbrook: wire fraud, tax evasion, falsification of legal documents, harassment, and criminal conspiracy to commit property sabotage. 3 other board members were charged with aiding and abetting. Karen was arrested on the courthouse steps mid-interview, her mic still clipped to her blouse when they cuffed her. I watched the footage later that night. She didn't scream. Didn't cry, just muttered, "This is political," as if reality could be voted away. Her trial was faster than mine. The evidence from our civil case transferred seamlessly. Carter's recordings were admissible. Maria's documents were duplicated and validated by forensics. Even the fake contractors were now cooperating, claiming Karen had manipulated them with promises of legal cover. In the end, Karen was found guilty on all major charges. She was sentenced to 14 years in state prison, 6 for fraud, 4 for conspiracy, and the rest for tax crimes and property destruction. Her assets were seized, including a lakeside home, 3 cars, and a consulting fund she had quietly built with diverted HOA dues. The fallout didn't stop there. Residents of Eagles Crest woke up to letters from the county. The HOA had been formally dissolved. The association bank accounts were frozen. Management was turned over temporarily to a court-appointed administrator to untangle the web of contracts and disputes. Some homeowners were livid, others relieved. A few sent me handwritten notes of apology. One family, the Vasquezes, who had lived quietly 2 doors from Karen, knocked on my door one evening. "We're sorry," the husband said. "We knew things weren't right. We were just afraid to say anything." I nodded. Fear's how she ruled. But that fear's gone. Now Carter came by the next morning with Scout wagging his tail like nothing had ever happened. He handed me a flash drive and grinned. Everything backed up. In triplicate. "You're the reason this worked," I said. "Me? Nah. I was just the eyes and ears. You were the backbone." We walked down to the bridge together. It was still standing, still solid. I'd reinforced it again after the last inspection and installed motion-triggered cameras for good measure. Carter looked at the bronze plaque mounted to the side. Freedom doesn't come without a fight. Trace and Cowell. He raised an eyebrow. Bit dramatic, don't you think? Maybe, but it's true. As we stood there, I looked out over the creek. It flowed the same as ever, clean, steady, ignoring everything that had happened above it. Nature didn't care about power trips or fake maps. It just kept going. And now, so could I. The dust took months to settle. You don't just gut an entire HOA, send its president to prison, and walk away like nothing happened. For a while, the headlines kept circling. Montana HOA implodes under fraud scandal. Homeowner destroys bridge saboteurs in court. And my personal favorite, the man who burned the HOA to the ground, figuratively. Neighbors I'd never spoken to before started waving as they drove by. Some apologized. Some tried to explain their silence. I didn't ask for any of it. I just nodded and let it pass. I wasn't looking for gratitude. I was looking for peace. And finally, it felt like it was possible. The administrator sent word 2 months later, Eagles Crest HOA was no more. All funds were either returned to homeowners or seized for restitution. The bylaws were nullified. The HOA office was closed, the signs taken down. The power Karen once clutched in her painted fingers vanished like a puff of cheap perfume. But what surprised me most? A letter. It was signed by 37 residents, some of the very same who once filed complaints about my house, my bridge, my fence color. They wanted to create a new neighborhood association, not a legal HOA, just a cooperative, voluntary, transparent, rotating leadership. No enforcement authority, just mutual aid and communication. They didn't ask me to join. They asked me to help write the rules. I agreed on one condition. No one ever tells another person what color mailbox to have. Ever. We all laughed. And just like that, something normal returned. I spent the next few weeks rebuilding not just the bridge, but everything around it. Reinforced railing, LED lighting for safety, a camera system that uploaded to the cloud. I even had Carter help me install a solar panel setup. The man's a genius with off-grid tech. And on the first clear day of spring, I held a small cookout. Just me, a few friends, the Vasquez family, Carter, Helen, and Maria, who drove all the way up from Billings with her teenage son in tow. We grilled by the water, let the kids toss stones into the creek, and raised a beer to the only bridge in Montana with a criminal record. Before they left, Helen handed me a thin manila folder. Thought you should have this. It's the official judgment and closure from the State Attorney General's office. Case closed. Karen Marchbrook is officially barred from serving in any administrative role or managing community funds in all 50 states. Did they really need to write all 50? I asked. Helen shrugged. Just making sure. Later that night, I walked out to the center of the bridge. The creek gurgled below, cool and steady. Owls called from the trees. The wind didn't whisper threats anymore. No nails left on planks. No paint thrown at walls. Just peace. Earned, not given. I ran my hand over the plaque once more. Bronze, polished, set in solid oak. Freedom doesn't come without a fight. Trace and Cowell. It wasn't about drama. It was about truth. I didn't start this war, but I ended it. And now, no one would ever lay another hand on my land without paying the price. Let that bridge be a reminder, not just to Karens, to anyone who thinks silence means surrender.